I've said this multiple times that I always thought you were almost too fair to Michigan, and I've Troy Aikman, and you, because you have such prominent platforms and are so beloved, that Troy makes sure that people know he'll be critical of the Cowboys, and he is. Yeah. And I told you this before. I said, you're almost too nice to Michigan because you don't want to be seen as a homer, which you're not. I mean, if you can't, you would have no idea you play at Ohio State if you listened and didn't know. Harbaugh's interesting. I have been a fan and been supportive, but I think here's been my argument to support Jim, despite the fact that he can't beat Ohio State and he's 1-4 in bowl games. So my takeaway is this. Well, who does beat Ohio State? Mm-hmm. Ohio State's a better program than Michigan. Oklahoma's a better program than Texas. It's more committed. So let's take the Ohio State argument out. I mean, hell, John Cooper got fired. He was winning 10.5 games a year, 11 games. It's a different standard, right? Yep. So that's not fair. The bowl games, Michigan State games, that matters. So we know Urban Meyer has been able to turn around Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State in an hour. I mean, literally overnight. Okay, last year, Harbaugh's 2-4. He's 1-4 in bowl games. He struggles with Michigan State. And, I've gotten to the point where now I'm starting to theorize it because it's, and I've said, there's a number, Kirk, using 12 games as the maximum. Every college football program has a number that if they have a really good coach, they can win. Alabama's number is 11.5. Ohio State's is 11.5. Oklahoma's is 11.5. USC's 10. They've had too many dips historically to put them. I've argued Michigan's is probably 8.5, 9. The medical school, the law school, Ann Arbor's like Austin North. There's a lot of stuff going on. People are distracted. The academics are pretty darn hard. Socially, it's a different fit for some people. Yeah. So I guess my point is, Harbaugh's winning about, your 8 games, and you would like him to win more bowl games. Has he really underachieved, or are we viewing? Should we flip the telescope? That if Michigan, all things considered, is about a 9-win team at its best, and Ohio State's about an 11 team. Look at their recruiting the last 20 years. Maybe guys like me. And I think I've defended Harbaugh. I think my perspective's been pretty accurate that he's not going to win 11 games. Let's get out of that space. Am I wrong? I don't view Michigan as Ohio State or Alabama. I never have.
This is a tough one because I expect them to be Ohio State. I expect them to be judged and viewed, and their fans, I think, expect them to be viewed at that level. Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel started it. Ohio State hadn't won a national championship since 1968. Jim Tressel brought them their first championship in 2002 when they beat Miami. And from that point on, they changed their expectations. Before that, it was try to win a Big Ten, try to go to the Rose Bowl.
Right.
Then it became, we're trying to get to the national championship every year. We know we can do it. That's the bar. We're going to get there. And Jim Tressel had obviously a hell of a run while he was there. And then they had a dip when he, at the end of his, and then Luke Fickell, and then here comes Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer looked around in the room at the players that he had on his roster, and he said, this isn't right. This is, we'll make do with this first year. And they were ineligible for the postseason, won all their games, but they weren't a great team as far as the personnel on their roster. And then he went to work on recruiting, and he raised the bar and created a stir within the Big Ten on how he did it. I feel like when Jim Harbaugh got hired, it's been 6 or 7 years now, when he got hired and you looked at what he did at Stanford, and when you looked at what he did with the 49ers, and you look at his legacy and what he did as a player at Michigan and who he played for, and you combine all of that in Ann Arbor with their tradition, there's no one, including you, that said, it's a good hire. Tell you what, he'll get him 8 wins. He'll get him 8 wins. No way. When they made that hire and he stepped to that podium, I don't know about you, but I was like, oh man. new 10-year war with Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh with their personalities. It's on. And every time they play, the winner's going to the championship and the loser's going to be so upset. That's what I expected every year with the hire of Jim Harbaugh, based on what he had done as a coach with the 49ers, got him to a Super Bowl, what he had done even at Stanford and as a player. So I think we're lowering the bar by saying, the fans don't care as much as they do in Columbus. Dude, that's as proud of a program as there is. And I don't think if you talk to a Michigan player, if you talk to Dez and said, Dez, listen, man, 8 wins is good for you. You should be proud of that. He would have smoke coming out of his ears. He'd be ready to brawl because, man, he wants to win every game they play. And so I will always have expectations of Michigan to not to be Texas. If you want to say Texas, they're an 8-win program. You have other than the Mac Brown had a nice run, for a number of years. And there were a few other Earl Campbell years, but for the most part, that's kind of what they've been. Michigan has not been like that. And so I have much higher standards. I keep waiting, Colin. I keep thinking, this is the year. Okay, now. And it's just, you look at the athletes at Alabama and Clemson and Oklahoma and Ohio State, and then you watch Michigan and you're like, what's happening? Is it recruiting?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is it development? Like, where's the quarterbacks? Tell me the last great Michigan had a run of about 15 years when Brady and Greasy and John Navarre and Todd Collins, it was like one after another after another. What was the last great Michigan quarterback? I'm going to go back to maybe Chad Henne in 2007.
Yeah.
07 was like, he was a solid, really, good. He's still, I think, around in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 07. That was the last great quarterback. When was the last great tailback? I mean, they think about the tailbacks that they had that were first rounders: Ty Wheatley, Leroy Horde, Anthony Thomas. It was just Biaka Batuka. It was one after another after. When was the last great Michigan tailback that made you hold your breath when he had the ball in his hands? I don't know. Mike Hart, maybe. That was 06. And he was just, he was a good college back. He didn't play in the NFL. Good college back. So my point is, you watch Alabama, you watch Ohio State, you watch Georgia, you watch these teams. When was the last great back that Ohio State had last year? When was the last great back that Alabama had last year? This year. So they've got to recruit at a very different level, and they've got to develop at a different level. And I still think they can. I just kind of dumbfounded, to be honest with you, that they're not at a much higher level with him at the helm and in charge.
I made this argument. I'll throw another theory at you. I like theories. So Jerry Seinfeld once talked about the comedy jet stream is that these northern cities, Seattle into Chicago or Minneapolis, Chicago, Boston, New York, were funnier cities. You had a lot of people, they got the joke. Educated, indoors in the winter, people that are well-read, people, the weather controls a little bit of your lifestyle, and that comedy clubs, Seinfeld called it, the comedy jet stream, the northern comedy jet stream. Any club you go in and see.
I've never heard that. That's interesting.
So I'm going to throw a theory at you. With Ohio State being the only real exception, is that I would call it the college football jet stream is the opposite. When USC is on, it's USC into Texas, Oklahoma, into the SEC, into the Florida schools, into Clemson. Is that cold weather programs? Washington was a power. They're not. Nebraska was a power. They're not. Michigan was a power. They're not. I'm talking about the 70s, 80s, 90s when I grew up. They were all powers. Now, Penn State with James Franklin's recruiting is absolutely comeback. Wisconsin, solid. Yep. But that I can make the argument that once ESPN went from airing 50 games to 500 and everybody is on TV, there is no reason for warm weather kids to go north. And that Ohio State is the exception. There's an exception to everything, and that they are an SEC team north. that it is simply it used to be when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was hard to get on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a warm weather school, it was all Northern powers.
Yeah.
So your thoughts about that theory that it's just when weather worsens, kids want to stay close to home by their friends, by their family.
And I also think the game has changed so much from what you're describing, the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was a running back. It was the offensive line. That was the stars. Now it's the quarterback and the quarterback coach. Like what all these quarterback gurus are working with 7th and 8th and 9th graders. And by the time they're seniors in high school, they're graduating early. They're in for spring early at their college. They go through winter and spring ball. They show up their freshman year and they're ready to roll. And so where do you have a better chance as a quarterback and a receiver where there's more emphasis on quarterback and receiver play currently over the last 7 to 10 years? You want to go to Arizona? You want to go to Texas? You want to go to Florida? You want to go to Louisiana? You want to go to California? Or do you want to go, up in Detroit, or up in Chicago? So I think the emphasis is on getting the ball and playing with the ball, as opposed to in our generation, it was pounding the line of scrimmage, I formation. So I think it's what you're describing is true, but I also think Brian Kelly, and he would tell you this if he were on here with us, 3-4 years ago, was trying to be Alabama. He was trying to recruit like Ohio State and Alabama and Clemson. And I think they got their doors blown off when they played Miami late about 3 years ago. It was an embarrassment. And he went back home. He told me this and had a real, I'm going to have a look in the mirror and I'm going to evaluate myself. And he talked to his team and he said, I've let you down. I want to get to know you as people. I want you to get to know me. I'm going to change our approach. We're going to play to who we are. We can recruit some of the best offensive linemen in the country, and we're going to. We can recruit some of the best tight ends in the country. Their tight ends are insane. And we're going to go get them. We're going to go get some great tailbacks. We're going to get an Ian Book, cerebral, smart, gym rat kind of quarterback. And we're going to go find some defensive players that can come in and play here, because the academic standards at Notre Dame are like a Stanford. They're at a different level. And so he, instead of trying to figure out how I can be Alabama, he said, we're going to just be us. They've kind of found some traction.
Yep. Listen, those Georgia games, those are 2 minutes left. Those are go either way games.
And they looked athletic. They looked good. Because I'm tough on Notre Dame because I'm just honest. And they for years, they shouldn't be on the field with these big boys. You saw what happened when they played Alabama in the national championship in 2012. It was like first series, Manti Te'o, Eddie Lacy, game's over. First series, I'm calling the game. I'm like, well, we got another 4 hours to kill here. I mean, what are we going to talk about? I mean, it was a debacle. Well, to their credit, they found their niche. Paul Chryst has found his niche. Iowa has found their niche. James Franklin. So I don't know if you can use a blanket statement, and of course, Ohio State, and say that all of that, what you're saying, applies. I think that these coaches that are in these areas, they've just looked in the mirror and they've realized, hey, we've got to adjust and not keep up with these LSUs and Alabamas and Georgias. And we're not Ohio State. We can't recruit like that. So that might be an angle Michigan considers taking, just to kind of get some footing and try to get out there and be true to who they want to be and maybe become more of a national powerhouse.